Welcome to the Human Together podcast, a show that is centered on humanity to create understanding and appreciation for individuals and groups that are both informative and thought-provoking. Today's episode is titled, A Photographer, Connection to People. Today is November 25th, an important day in my personal life because my wife, Diane, and I were married on this day in 1995. As we approach Thanksgiving, our relationship is one that I am eternally thankful for, as Diane has been my constant companion, friend, and teammate. Also during this week, many of your own families will gather together to celebrate the holiday, catch up by recalling stories, and share your love to solidify your family bond. Such is Thanksgiving with my family. We gather often, albeit not always physically, but in spirit. Today I'll share with you about a family member who no longer joins us in the corporal sense, but his life force is always ever present, my Uncle Gene. Gene Craig was not a wealthy man, nor did he reach the echelons of becoming famous, and his photographs do not hang in majestic museums. None of that matters, because he influenced people in subtle and inspirational ways, as you are about to learn. I've always had an affinity for my Uncle Gene, because like me, he was the middle child of 3 children. In a sense, it gave me an insight about how he was raised and how he interacted with people as an adult. For this episode, I could have interviewed countless amounts of individuals who would have provided unique perspectives and influences Gene made upon them. The love of his wife, Linda, whom he was married to for 56 years, would have provided day-to-day insights that would have provided a complete and holistic look of my uncle. His daughter, Janine, was the light of his life and would have provided inspirational and heartfelt stories. Both of these wonderful people could provide boundless amounts of background information about Gene as a loving husband and father. However, I wanted this episode to be for them. What did others have to say about Gene? Again, a list of influenced people could have been expansive from viewpoints of former students, church members, and numerous amounts of people he influenced over his life. In the end, I centered on 2 people. His younger sister, my mom, Doris, his older brother, Floyd. From these perspectives, I've placed my Uncle Gene as the center focal point as a middle child, which in my opinion is the best. I can't help myself. Let's move forward though, shall we? I start with my mom. I wanted people to understand who Gene was as a child and a young man. I wanted nuggets of information and stories that would both enlighten and be empathetic. Ultimately, I wanted people to know about their meager upbringing as children of a Baptist minister in rural Oklahoma. His sister offers the following.
He was 5 years older than I was. My big brother, our oldest brother, was mostly gone when I came along. He was commissioned to take me places, which he not only didn't like sometimes, but he did it anyway. He wanted to create a miniature golf course in our backyard there at the parsonage. And so Mother said, that's fine. So he took tin cans and put them in the ground and made a miniature golf course. He also was a disc jockey from the chicken house. He strung wire from the chicken house up to the house and played records into the house. And he would often ask for requests, and I would have to go out on the back porch and holler the requests. One Christmas, he always worked at the grocery store that had Christmas trees, but we couldn't afford a big one. But at Christmas Eve, he could choose a Christmas tree that he wanted, and he would choose a big one and bring it home, and we would undecorate the little one and put the big one up. He was a hard worker, worked in high school in a grocery store, and he was an excellent artist. Not very many people knew he drawed a lot. He had a cartoon character named Oops that he took on while he was in college, and it was a funny cartoon. We loved it. He married Linda in 1961. He also graduated from OBU that year, and they were off to Texas to teach school. Taught art, and then came proficient in taking pictures and opened a studio where he could take pictures. He loved talking to people and hearing their stories about how they got to where they were in their lives. He was a quiet soul and a gentle spirit, was always there when you needed him.
As Gene became more proficient behind the lens of a camera, he was able to teach skills to his students that served them well over his 20-year teaching career. After teaching, Gene decided to open his own photography shop. He called it A Photographer, a simple name with an underlying message of quality photography with a human touch. Over his years as a professional photographer, he captured every aspect of people's lives, from weddings to portraits. In my mind, it was family pictures which his genius truly shined. During the early 1980s, my own family, Mom and Dad and 2 brothers, took part in a family photo shoot at Gene's shop. I remember the day fondly as Gene brought out our true nature, 3 fun-loving and goofy brothers and parents that were along for the ride. As I reflect on the photos, I look beyond the feathered hairdos, the parachute pants, and bad sweaters, a true snapshot of bad 80s fashion. The lasting memory that went beyond the photos to the thoughts of laughter, joy, and family togetherness. No other photographer on the face of the earth could have captured this moment other than my Uncle Gene. It brings tears to my eyes thinking of the countless families that have the same type of family pictures. Pictures that capture family love and bond, and most importantly, the heart. Gene used the lens of a camera as an avenue to connect with people. His subjects were at ease as they related to Gene. The subtle smiles of a child, the longing look of 2 people in love, and the many nuances of families, all brought forth through Gene's artistry. As I was preparing this story, I read an article titled, "How to Be a Great Photographer and Maybe Everything Else." The story offered a very poignant quote. I read, "More important than technique, more important than equipment, more important than the angle or the sunlight or the details of the photo was the simple art of connection." No better quote can encapsulate my uncle's genius behind the lens of a camera. Even without the ever-present camera at the ready, Gene was able to relate to people in unique ways that I couldn't voice by myself. So I reached out to his brother, Floyd, for a further perspective. During our conversation, Floyd recalled a communication Gene had with his minister, a person Gene considered not only a spiritual guide, but a confidant. Floyd had this to offer.
Pastor told me later, he said, Gene would come down here to my office. And he said we would just sit and talk, and mainly he would listen. And that's the main thing about Gene. He had the ability to listen. And once he listened, he had an incredible ability to ask the right questions. It was unsettling for some because he asked a very pointed question, on target. But the preacher told me, the pastor, he said, Gene had the ability to reach into my heart and ask the right questions.
Asking the right questions. Disarming at times. But this is one way Gene drew correlation amongst people. Another way was humor. Humor was certainly in his tool belt as he used it to further draw rapport with people. Gene's combination of asking the right questions and humor often drew interesting results. I often referred to, as did other family members, as his way of connecting with people in this manner as the Gene test. I refer to this as the quizzing one receives when they are new to the family. It was not a physical test, and one did not have to answer a slew of multiple-choice questions about family history. However, it was Gene's way of getting to know you better in a nice, gentle, and sometimes pressing manner. And many times, if they were together, he was often joined by his brother Floyd to take part in the line of questioning. I don't want to make this sound like an inquisition, and those that took part in a Gene test would probably attest that they were much better for it. I tried to prepare Diane for her pending Gene test. Listen, Diane, you're about to meet my Uncle Gene and my Uncle Floyd, and they're going to ask you a series of questions. But don't worry, they're really nice guys, and they mean well. I did not let on that there was a chance she would fail the test, but I was certain to receive an assessment feedback from my uncles, and most importantly, a most poignant one from Uncle Gene. I don't remember the particular line of questioning that Diane was peppered with, but guaranteed it was comprehensive and far-reaching. She answered each question with a smile and confidence. I believe she even enjoyed the process. See what I told you? Gene could pose crafty questions, yet you loved him for it all the more. Trust was being built. Not only did she pass the Gene test, I believed he liked her more than me at this point. She really flipped the script on the Gene test. She passed the Gene test with flying colors. By his accounts and evaluation, this relationship was going to work out pretty well for me, which was all well and good, and it left me wondering if Diane was slowly plotting to supersede me in the family hierarchy. I say this in jest, but needless to say, Uncle Gene was a Diane fan. Many others have passed the Gene test and are now long-standing members of the Craig family, a true testament of the longevity of Gene's evaluative efforts. See what I told you? Unique, introspective, but always with humor. It was Gene's hidden superpower. I refer back to my conversation with Floyd about Gene's humor.
But he also had, as I mentioned earlier, an incredible sense of humor, as you do, by the way. And he would laugh, his kind of subterranean chuckle, and he would see funny things in all kinds of things. He had the ability to laugh at himself and to laugh at other people, not in derision, but in affirmation. So when I think of Gene, I think of these things about him.
Subterranean chuckle. After our interview, I thought about this quite a bit. In my mind's eye, I drew a picture of my Uncle Gene sitting there with a full smile on his face, his teeth slightly showing, the slightest hint of laughter, and the feeling that he cared about you in unspoken ways. His actions truly spoke louder than words. This image of my Uncle Gene will forever be ingrained in my memory, a connection to people in its purest form. When I think back about the life of my Uncle Gene, I think of everyday heroes. Heroes in this sense are not faster than a speeding bullet. They're not more powerful than a locomotive, and they do not have the ability to leap tall buildings with a single bound. A cape or a mask is never adorned, and essentially Clark Kent remains in the telephone booth instead of becoming Superman. The heroes that I have been speaking about, like my Uncle Gene, have the incredible ability to be real. They provide tangible examples of what it takes to be a caring and compassionate person. The hero I'm speaking of looked beyond the lens of a camera to touch people's hearts, as he did mine. He taught me in slight but important ways to value people in all their forms and walks of life by listening, loving, and of course, the occasional question. Maybe you have someone in your life like my Uncle Gene that will be at your family's Thanksgiving festivities. If so, take the time to appreciate their existence. They may not say a lot. They may ask a few poignant questions about your life, and hopefully they will do it with a subterranean chuckle. But certainly, they will subtly influence your life. My Uncle Gene lived life beautifully, and it did not go unnoticed by me. He was an integral element of hopefulness and life-affirming presence in my life, which has served me along my own journey to become human together.